Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the yearly Best Management Practice for Municipal Operations session, or Pollution Prevention session for municipal operations. Now, why do we do this every year? We do this every year because it's an educational requirement from phase 2 of the stormwater regulations, which is connected. Phase 2 is connected to the Clean Water Act of 1972. In the late 90s, they developed phase 2 to address non-point pollution and stormwater, which wasn't addressed in the original law. Okay. So this program is really designed and set up for park systems, DPW, and highway departments to show you guys the environmental impact that actually occurs from your daily work schedule and other impacts that you need to be cautious about. Now here we use as our example the lawn. We put a gross amount of pesticides and fertilizers on our lawns, and when it rains, it washes off the lawn, ends up down the catch basin, and ends up into our waterway. And it creates quite an environmental impact on its route. So we're going to take a look at stormwater management, pollutants, and what resources in Rockland County that you actually do have. Just a little bit about Rockland's water. 85% of our potable water comes from underground aquifers. And Rockland is its own watershed. So it's a watershed we want to protect. And in Rockland, actually, you're very fortunate. You have quite a bit of open space, and very valuable open space, because it tends to be concentrated in one part of the county. However, the flip side of that is all of your development is concentrated also in one part of the county. And those developed areas have a gross amount of stormwater runoff. So yes, stormwater pollution is a problem in Rockland County. And it enters storm drains and it's not treated. That's the biggest dilemma right there, is that it's not treated. Because stormwater picks up and carries pollutants into our streams, rivers, and local water supplies. And they would pick up all kinds of stuff you couldn't even imagine, the stuff that is found in these catch basins on a yearly basis. And of course, now we are in the era of the pandemic. Masks and gloves are easily transported by stormwater into our catch basins. So one of the red flags we want to keep an eye out on right now. So what are the sources of pollutants? Where do they actually come from? Commercial and municipal properties, which are you guys, are notorious for storing soil, petroleum products, salt, litter, and debris. Construction sites have a gross amount of sediment and debris. Lawn care is a plethora of pesticides and fertilizers. And septic systems and pet waste. Faulty septic systems are another source of a pollutant, and pet waste. And with that pet waste, you can include geese and other invasive animal species. And why are they such a big problem? Well, when excess nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus, sediments, and pollutants cause an algae bloom, they block sunlight from penetrating the water, and then reduces the growth of plants that provide underground food and shelter. And those excess nutrients really feed that nitrogen and phosphorus really feeds that algae and makes the matter worse. It's a vicious cycle. And eventually you get to a level where the algae has eaten up all the oxygen that's in the water, and the level of dissolved oxygen has been reduced to such a degree that fish and other life are deprived of life-sustaining oxygen. So, when fertilizers are applied to thin lawns, or when pollutants are allowed to accumulate, the excess runs off the lawn or stored area into the storm drains. And once it enters the storm drains, eventually those drains are connected to waterways. So once it enters that storm drain, it goes into the waterways where the pollutants accelerate that algae growth, an accelerated rate of eutrophication, and an accelerated rate of sedimentation, and gives us our polluted waterways. So what can we do to address this? When they were developing phase 2 of the stormwater regulations in the 90s, they also developed a term known as best management practices, which got picked up by quite a few other organizations and actually has become a popular term for several years. But what are best management practices in terms of stormwater and municipal operations? Well, it's a comprehensive management plan that addresses stormwater at its source through catchment systems, storm drain systems, and at collection points. Best management practices also makes a use of biofiltration in retention ponds, detention basins, and vegetative swales. Those retention ponds and detention basins are the collection points in the first point. And best management practices also relies on a variety of native plant material with an emphasis on floodplain plants that can handle inundation and drought. And also I'd like to include that your educational component that you're receiving today actually is part of a best management practice also. It's addressing stormwater at its source. So the basic idea behind BMP is to manage clean water runoff and prevent pollutants from getting into our clean water. And one of the ways you can do this is when you're building new facilities, plan to include stormwater pollution prevention in that development, in that new facility. And we know we're not all getting new facilities right away. So yes, we do have to retrofit our existing facilities. It's part of our stormwater regulations. This discharge, they claim it's paint, but I beg to differ, only because it's a little bit clear there where it's coming out of the spillway. But you can always get your water tested. So the moral of the story, and really where we're going to go today, is an emphasis on that best management practice, treating stormwater at its source. And here is one of the sources. It's our catch basins that we see in our streets and highways. Those catch basins are for rain. They're drains, and the drain is for rain. It's not for pouring the oil that you just changed in your dirt bike. That drain is not for used oil, pollutants, gasoline, or anything else that you need to dispose of. When I was a child, this was a common practice. Anything that people needed to get rid of, they would just go out to the drain in the street and dump it. Well, that drain is connected to a waterway, and that oil will find its way into the closest stream. So, because of all of that, that's why you're here, to prevent that kind of pollution. So out of that, we have a workshop outline, and this outline is designed for all municipal separate storm source systems, MS4s, okay? What that means is that the stormwater system is separate from the sewage system. Certain places like Manhattan, it's a combined system. When it rains, that water goes into the sewage treatment system. In Rockland County, it does not. Our rainwater goes directly to a waterway. Because of that, we have measurable goals that we have to track. And basically, we're tracking the amount of pollutants that are entering our waterways. We have to develop best management practices to address that, to mitigate that kind of environmental damage. And with that, we'll look at a few self-assessment tools. So what are the program requirements for an MS4? Well, it's to develop a program that prevents pollutants from municipal operations. And every 1 to 3 years, those municipal operations should be performing a self-assessment check. And they should be putting into place management practices to reduce those pollutants. One of the things you want to prioritize are your facilities that are next to reservoirs, streams, and 303 water bodies, and of course, wells, your sources of drinking water. A 303 water body is an impaired water body. And in Rockland County to date, we have 4 of them. The Hackensack, or actually 3, the Hackensack tributaries, Sparkle Creek, and Pascack Brook. They are impaired. They will not support fish or wildlife at all. So they need to be worked on. And in terms of total maximum daily loads, those are the amount of pollutants that they are currently receiving, and we need to reduce those TMDLs. In the requirements, number 1 requirement is to train employees. One of the most unusual things about phase 2 of the Clean Water Act is it was the first act or law that actually stipulated an educational requirement. And not only are you guys, DPWs and park systems, trained, but so are everyone else, including the general public. I just got in the mail my yearly town newsletter, and there's 2 pages on stormwater. So, any contractors that you subcontract to for a municipal operation must also follow the same best management practices as you. And of course, you have to set goals and keep records as part of these practices. One of the things you need to do is list all your facilities, provide a description of each facility, and a map of each facility. And of course, note the stormwater hazards on those facilities. There's certain requirements of the municipal operations in terms of measurable goals. These operations are required every year to keep and report their measurable goals. Those include municipal building and grounds maintenance, parks and open space, vehicle and fleet maintenance, stormwater drainage and treatment system maintenance, and street and bridge maintenance. There are also some recommended categories. They're not required categories. And those include winter road maintenance, stream bank maintenance, solid waste, new construction, and right-of-ways. All right. It's suggested that they set measurable goals, however, not required. Some of them, I think, should be required. So let's take a look at our first municipal building and ground maintenance goals. Basically, they're telling you to keep a clean shop. So if a spill were to occur, it wouldn't pollute the environment. They want you to clean up spills immediately without water if possible, and then dispose of the cleanup materials properly. Here they're using Speedy Dry or one of the absorbent materials. It looks like kitty litter almost. All right. If you have places where you're going to get drips, like oil cans, you want to place drip pans or absorbent materials underneath those mounted traps to capture any leaks or drips or potential drips. You want to sweep and clean paved storage areas monthly. When I worked at the Arboretum, rain days was our shop cleaning days. If it was too rainy to work outside or the garden, that was the day that we would clean the shop. You do not want to hose down areas unless water is being collected or directed to a sanitary sewer. You do not want to go down a catch basin, that's for sure. All your floor drains actually should be sealed unless they're going to a proper cleaning facility, oil water separator or sanitary storage system. And there is a post procedure for petroleum spills in terms of prevention and response. If you do have a petroleum spill, they must be reported to the DEC unless they meet all of the following requirements. Number one, the spill is known to be less than 5 gallons. Number two, the spill is contained and under control. 3, the spill will not reach state's water or other land. And 4, the spill was cleaned up within 2 hours of discovery. Any deviation from that must be reported to the DEC. And of course, near all your gas and petroleum facilities, you should have a phone number posted in case of an emergency contact, in case you need to reach them. Of course, number 1 is always dial 111. But you should also have posted the New York DEC spill hotline number, and of course, any local numbers that are relative to your location, police departments, fire department, et cetera, et cetera. If you're out on the street, and yes, this does happen with DPW crews and municipal crews more often than you would think. It could be a spill or an emergency response. Quite often, car accidents. A lot of times you guys get called out on car accidents to clean up the street. There could be a gas or petroleum spill as a result of that accident. So number 1, do not place yourself in a hazardous position or situation. Yes, it's nice to be a hero, but before you become a hero, think twice. You don't want to be a dead hero, okay, or a hero that's been injured. But yes, you do want to be a hero. I'm not saying avoid accidents like the plague, but just be logical and think. Do not place yourself in a hazardous position. If it's a spill or fire, stay upwind and upgrade of the accident site. And do not walk in or near the spill, leak, or fire until it is safe. And of course, coordinate with other response agencies. 9 times out of 10, the other response agencies are there before you. You're usually called to go clean up that situation. However, you never know. You may be the first one there also. In terms of spill prevention for daily field operations, before you go out to the field, transfer materials if need be. If you only need a gallon of gasoline, there's no reason to take 5 gallons. If you have a 1-gallon can present, transfer that material in the shop where you have Speedy Dry and all that material available if for some reason there is a spill. If you think a spill may occur and you're out in the field, cover your catch basins. This way your material is contained. They make special covers for catch basins now. Just a source of some of my material, where I've gotten some of this material from, or if you need to further investigate any of this, you can go to the DEC Pollution Prevention Guide. For vehicle and equipment cleaning, you want to designate a wash area inside if possible, and cover or berm that wash area if it is outside. But above all, collect the water, direct it to a sewage system for treatment. It's polluted water. It's got a lot of grease, dirt, grime, salt on it. If you're engine cleaning, especially if you're engine cleaning, you've got a gross amount of grease, design a wash area again to collect that wash area. All right. Collect wash area when chemicals, solvents, or degreasers are used. But always, in general, just always collect it. And if that washing must occur outside, use a designated paved area, or use a ground cloth over gravel. This way that material does not percolate into the ground and contaminate a well. In particular, your well in the shop. You want to maintain vehicles inside or under cover in terms of repairs. But if you're going to store idle equipment, try to keep that under cover. And if you can, drain the fluids before storing that equipment outside. You don't want a leaky transmission slowly leaking into the ground. In time, will pollute the ground. You want to designate an area with no connection to storm drains for draining motor fluids. All right, you drain it into a container, but you're going to get a little bit of spillover. So you want it to go onto an absorbent pad or a designated area where it doesn't find its way into the waterway. So collect your leaking fluid into drip pans. Drain all your fluids immediately on stored equipment if you can. And if outside, use a tarp, ground cloth, or drip pans to collect it. Transfer used fluids to a waste or recycling drum once you get it collected. Don't hose down work areas in the catch basins after you're finished when you go to clean up. All right. If those work areas are washed, collect water and direct it to the sanitary sewer. Yeah. Washing it down the drain does not make it disappear. What it does is make it go into our local waterways and again pollute our local waterways. And I'm sure there's a great amount of people, myself included, that like to fish. So we don't want polluted waterways. And if you don't like to fish, you like to boat or canoe or swim or recreate somehow in water. And if you don't do any of those and you're a total couch potato, I'm sure you drink water. So think about that as we keep going forward here. Inside your shop, you want to post signs that show that storm drains and sinks are not to receive hazardous waste material. You know, especially if this is a sink or area you're using every day to clean up before you go have lunch. The last thing you want is a dirty, polluted sink to clean your hands. In terms of repair and equipment, you want to keep your equipment clean. Don't allow excess grease and oil to build up on that equipment. It makes regular inspection much easier when you're looking for leaks if that equipment is clean. And if you do find a leak, repair it immediately. Do not allow it to leak into the ground. Go let your mechanic know. Your next required category is stormwater drainage and treatment maintenance. When you're inspecting your catch basins and your stormwater outfall, there's certain things you want to look for in terms of non-point visual pollution. If you notice any odors, stains, color, foam, oily sheen, or floatables, follow that water and you will find the source of pollution. But if you notice any of that, notify your supervisors as soon as possible. Get that pollution investigated. Get that pollution tested. Let's find out what it is. And then let's find the source. In terms of your stormwater drainage and treatment systems in maintenance, you want to develop a cleaning schedule. And first you want to include the pipes and ponds that drain into 303 impaired water bodies, and then other streams and watersheds. You can use community groups to keep all streams and water bodies pollutant and trash free. There are community environmental groups that would love to assist you in these efforts. Two that I'm thinking of immediately, one is a fishing club, the Deep Knee Fishing Club. They have chapters throughout the country. They will go out and help clean up polluted areas. Anything in terms of waterways, the Deep Knee Fishing Club is very helpful. In terms of Rockland County, another one I can think of is Keep Rockland Beautiful. They actually have a list of people that love to go out and pick up litter. And this is what you're looking at in this picture, litter. And right now we can include a mask and we can include plastic gloves along with that picture, unfortunately. The mask, while I'm thinking about it and it's on the front of my mind, disposable mask takes 450 years to decompose. Once they are in our waterways, they will find their way out into the oceans. This is already occurring. And our sea mammals will mistake those masks for jellyfish. So any aquatic animal that eats jellyfish will eat a mask. And nutritionally, that really does not help them at all. Totally screws up their metabolism. First of all, they're hungry. They're now full and they do not have a desire to eat. Their hunger diminishes. Their nutrition follows it. So for your drainage and treatment system areas in terms of maintenance, we want to set up a record-keeping system that records all maintenance, repair, and clean out of catch basins. They should all be cleaned out when they're 50% full. And of course, inspected and cleaned more often in construction areas. And this is just an example of one of the types of forms that can be utilized to track that maintenance and repair. If we have areas that we're finding that we're cleaning on an excessive schedule, an excessive amount of times, you can replace the catch basins with a larger catch basin. You can use erosion and control sediment controls. You can seed and mulch or use a silt fence or a sediment trap. Anything to arrest and control that sediment from entering our catch basins. You want to properly dispose of this material. And if you suspect that it's contaminated, have it tested. So, what are our measurable goals? Our measurable goals are the number of catch basins inspected and the number of catch basins cleaned. That record must be kept and submitted yearly. And you're going to see with the rest of our measurable goals, this system is going to follow suit. It's always going to be a number of something that we need to record. For example, street and bridge maintenance. You want to write down your street cleaning priorities. The ones that are priority are near construction sites, where soil erosion occurs, near water bodies, parks and recreation, and you want to record those maintenance priorities. Of course, you know in the end you're going to have to record and write down how often you address those priorities. So, how often should you be cleaning your streets? At least once a year, and as soon as possible after the snow melts. The reason being is it's laden with a lot of salt. Let's try to clean up that salt and sediment ASAP before our severe summer storms wash it down our catch basins. Because when it does, this is what happens to our waterways. And again, you want to properly dispose of those sweepings, and you want to have it tested if you feel it's contaminated. Before you wash a bridge or paint a bridge, you have to inspect that surface. And it's rated on a DOT engineering instruction and spec sheet. And of course, you should have an engineer do this. And if it has a DOT rating under 4, do not wash that bridge. Washing it can impair that bridge and weaken that bridge. So anything under a DOT rating of 4, do not wash. If it's above 4 and you're going to wash that bridge prior to painting, your maximum amount of pressure used is 1,000 PSI. Do not go above that, because again, then you are forcing bits of metal and rust off that bridge and you're weakening that bridge. The ironic thing is, if it's a rating under 4, you can still drive on that bridge. That's kind of scary in some ways when you think about it. You want to use a containment system for your debris. And if it's over a waterway, you want to use water booms to catch any of your floating waste. And again, clean all that up. If you have unpaved roads and trails, you want to seed and mulch any exposed oil or soil, to contain that. Or if you can't get seeding or seeding is not possible, you want to use erosion control blankets and install that silt fence if the soil is moving. So you want to inspect that. So what are our measurable goals for street and bridge maintenance? Number 1 is the number of miles of streets that have been swept. All right, the state wants to see that record. The number of acres of parking lots that you sweep. Another required category is right-of-way maintenance. You want to maintain your right-of-way maintenance areas during a dry season. Late summer, early fall is perfect. And if you do any grading or change of that grade or disturb any of those areas, you want to seed and mulch right away. If you're using herbicides, and this is not just for right-of-way, but this is also for park systems and your highways for your mediums, your grass mediums. If you're using herbicides, you want to calibrate that equipment and you want to follow the label directions. Do not double the amount of herbicide. More is not always better. Okay, keep that in mind. You want to apply herbicides when the plants are in mid-growth The reason being is the herbicide sticks to the plant, and that's how it works. So if it's not in mid-growth, if it's a younger plant, the herbicide may not be as effective. If it's in full growth, you may have a harder time killing that plant with an herbicide. So mid-growth is perfect. And of course, don't apply it just before or during rain, because if you do, guess what? It's going down the catch basin. And by now, we all know what that catch basin is connected to. And do not apply if the wind is more than 10 miles per hour, because that material will drift and affect other areas. Extremely important for your highway guys. If you're putting herbicides on the sides of the road and there's private property adjacent to that, God forbid you get a drift and you kill Mrs. Garden Club lady's rare plant. She will be calling up your office, I guarantee it. Wetlands, streams, lakes, and wellhead areas, you really should limit the herbicides, pesticides, and fertilizers that you use. If you are applying any of these materials with a backpack sprayer, you want to use a low volume, low pressure. The lower the pressure, the heavier the droplet, the less chance of drift. If there are plants in the area that you're concerned about, you can use an herbicide cone. With an herbicide cone, you're now able to treat only the plant that you want to get rid of. And of course, do not use any of these materials in high runoff areas. Measurable goals again, guess what? The number of miles of ditch and roadside mowed or treated per year. Outdoor container storage, all of you, park systems, road departments, DPWs, you all have some kind of outdoor storage. You want to keep the rain out of that material as much as possible. If you can, move those materials indoors or get them under cover. Keep those materials stored away from storm drains and water bodies. Label all those containers so we know what they are. Burn those storage areas. And again, build a structure over that storage area if at all possible. They do make some nice temporary outdoor storage systems that you can buy. And these are just a couple examples of some of them. You want to check your containers for leaks and replace those containers with good containers if nearby. Because if there were a groundwater storage supply here, looking at these containers in this picture, especially with the one tilted over, it has potential for leaking. And if that's your well, if that's the water you're drinking in your shop, making your coffee with, you've got a high potential for that getting polluted with those containers there. If you have a septic system, or some of your park systems, you may have septic systems in your parks for your bath facilities. You want to inspect and maintain those septic systems, and you want to pump them out every 3 to 5 years. More so if there's heavy public use, especially your parks. I know when I worked for the Park Commission in Morris County in New Jersey, we had certain parks that had to get pumped out every 6 weeks. The systems were not that big. The parks were getting more and more popular. And especially now with the COVID, I notice a lot of your parks are extremely crowded. So you want to keep an eye on your septic systems. Cornell Cooperative Extension does have some educational information. If you contact our lab, I will look for it for you. Park systems. Park systems have a great potential for non-point pollution. They're a magnet for litter situations from the public coming in. Unfortunately, we need to educate people more and more with carry in, carry out procedures. Pesticides, fertilizers, and lots of other materials being used. You want to use your pesticides at the right time of year. You want to apply fertilizer on a dry day. You really should test your soil before you fertilize. And of course, whether it's a pesticide or a fertilizer, use only the recommended amount and follow directions on your labels all the time. You really want to use an integrated pest management system in your park systems. There's no reason to be using pesticides unless you absolutely have to. You want to store your material properly. Keep your pesticides, fertilizer, and mulch under cover. And of course, what's your measurable goal for park systems? The amount of pounds of phosphorus applied in the fertilizer, the amount of pounds of nitrogen applied in fertilizers, and the amount of pounds of pesticides and herbicides applied as pure products. That's before dilution. One of our suggested categories that I really think should be a required category is winter road maintenance. All right. That material should be stored with a permanent roof. And if you do not have a permanent roof, that material must be covered with temporary plastic cover. And your parking lots must be swept regularly. You really should sweep and pick up and contain that material. Otherwise, when it rains, it's going into our waterways. It's going to change the pH of our waterways and eventually accumulate. Our fisheries will decline. If you're an angler like I am, it's the last thing you want is declined fisheries. We want to catch fish if we can. So if you're storing that material in your shops, you want to use a berm and a curbing and prevent that material from entering the storm drain. You want to write down storage site operations and clean up procedures should be put in place for those operations. You want to do this on a monthly basis or bi-monthly basis if you can. You also want to develop improved application technologies in terms of salt and de-icing agents. Adjust your spinners, adjust your chutes, make sure they're calibrated correctly. You want to use some caution with some of this material. We're finding out that brine is more and more dangerous than we actually think it is. Again, DOT, as a suggestion, and I think as should be a requirement, is you should record the number of times per year salt storage facilities are inspected, the number of times repairs are made, the number of staff that's trained on new equipment and calibration. And of course, you should really be recording the number of storms and miles that you're putting this material down. Another suggestion is streambank and wetland habitat maintenance. All right. You can plant trees or vegetation along these wetland areas, and they will help mitigate and clean up some of that non-point pollution. It will help improve water quality. Because this is one of those projects in works, in the process of being planted. Again, Deep Knee Fishing Club is in there helping. Park Commission employees are in there helping. The youth that you see in this picture are Cub Scouts. Some of the other adults are the parents of Cub Scouts. In terms of using youth, great source of energy. However, I would recommend that you get a parent for every 2 or 3 children to help keep those children contained and focused. Enough said in that area. But this is that same project after planting, as the water was beginning to fill. And you can see here they used what's called the core log to hold back that planting material and prevent that soil from washing into the waterway. Once those plants are established, that material will not wash into the waterway. And theoretically, that core log in time will decompose and plant material will grow through it. In fact, there's plants planted right in it right there. And this is part of our finishing result of that project. Within a year, the plants were mature and flowering. You can also do it using shrubs. And it's a soil stabilization project known as brush layering. Again, they're using core logs or erosion blankets to hold back the soil, and now planting shrubs in between that eventually will grow, and this material will decompose. Here's your fiber rolls here, your core logs, and in this situation, they're also using rocks to help hold back and stabilize a bank. So when you're doing this bioengineering system with shrubs, timing is very critical. This really has to be done at the correct time of year. Cuttings are taken in the dormant season and then installed late winter, early spring. They're simple cuttings of woody plant material, no roots, that are just placed into the ground, and they eventually grow and root on their own. When it's properly installed, it can be very successful, and this is the ending result of one of those projects. What are your measurable goals? All right, one of your goals is to make a list of the important Streambank stabilization projects that need to be completed. One of the ways you can retain sediment is also with a sediment barrier like a silt fence. However, all too often we see these silt fence installed incorrectly. Let's make sure we do it correctly. Otherwise, it has absolutely no benefit whatsoever. Your stakes want to be downslope. Preferably have 16 inches of that stake below ground, 20 inches above. 6 inches of that filter cloth should be buried under the ground. And it should be a maximum area of 1/4 acre per 100 feet of silt fence. DEC does have guidance for this material, and I really suggest you take a look at it. You want to place your silt fence across a hill on contour, not up and down the hill. And of course, if it's going to be there for any long-term period, I like the wire-backed material. It's a little bit sturdier. It's going to stand up to weather and other conditions. And of course, another measurable goal is the number of feet of silt fence used to protect streams and wetlands during road construction. Again, this is just an example of a form for your facility self-audit that you need to do every 1 to 3 years. And here you can see it looks like it's actually for a shop, a maintenance shop, a mechanic shop. All right. Are the vehicles parked indoors or outdoors or under a roof? What about vehicle washing, maintenance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera on this list? Okay. Let's review. Your MS4 annual reports, municipal separate sewer stormwater systems, annual reports. What do you have to do? You've got to keep data. There were recommended categories and suggested categories and required categories. So you must provide records for your report writing. And all of those reports are due June 1st. That's why your stormwater and pollution prevention training is in January and February, because that educational requirement must be completed by March 1st to gather that data to get it in for June 1st. One of the things that must be reported is the progress in achieving measurable goals, the evaluation of the program effectiveness, any changes in the program, deviations from the year before, and what activities are you planning for the upcoming year in terms of training and retrofitting stormwater systems. Every 3 years, you must conduct a self-assessment checklist with 4 steps. The first step is policies and procedures. List of the best management practices that are currently being used, which ones are in place, which ones are planned. The format, is it a written document or is it just basically word of mouth? And when was the latest revision or review noted? Number 2, the number of staff in each category, the number of staff receiving training in pollution prevention, and the percentage of staff trained in policies and procedures. Number 3 is equipment. The adequacy. Upgrades or new equipment needed. You know, earlier when I mentioned cleaning equipment is also important in terms of tracking oil leaks and stuff like that. It gives you an idea of when you need to replace that equipment. By inspecting and cleaning that equipment regularly, you now have all of that data. So when you need to go for new equipment, you can lay that data out on the table and say, here, this is what we're spending on maintenance and upkeep of this equipment. This is what a new equipment would result in. And you can compare the two. And it gives you an argument for new equipment. Very, very important, especially as administrators are looking closer and closer at budgets over the next few years. So make sure those proper maintenance schedules are in place. Make sure you're keeping those records. It really helps when you need a new dump truck. Number 4 is the coordination and collaboration with other outfits besides yourselves. Are your policies consistent across municipal departments? All right. County, regional, or state agencies, are they consulted? Yes, they are. Community groups and citizens, are they involved? You know, are your volunteers and advisory groups involved? Is there outreach and education? For the most part, yes. Otherwise, I would not be here today recording this for you. What are the educational components that are critical? One of them is to make sure all your storm drains are labeled and your catch basins are labeled with a logo. Generally, it's a fish. All right, just to remind residents that there is a connection to a waterway. Whatever goes down that storm drain is going into your waterway, and it will affect the water that you recreate in, and it will affect your drinking water. The other educational component is right now training municipal employees about stormwater, best management practices, and ways to prevent pollution. And in addition, Phase 2 requires a yearly educational event for residents with the use of flyers or town newsletters. So to summarize, MS4 Permit requires municipal pollution prevention and good housekeeping. The categories of municipal operations were checked. There were required ones and suggested ones. And the best management practices are required as part of your stormwater maintenance plan. In addition, you must keep track of data for all of your measurable goals, and you must use assessment tools to keep those records. And above all, report the good things that you're doing. Let everyone know the good things, not just the bad things. All too often, that's all we hear is negative news about our daily operations. Let's record the good things. Let's report the good things. Let's let the public know the good things. Do before and after pictures of stream sites when you clean them up. Do pictures of Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts coming to clean up polluted areas, working in cooperation with yourselves. Very important that we let everyone know the good things that we are doing. And above all, let's remember no dumping in the catch basins. The drain is for rain. Don't flush the wipes. All of those mottos, drains to waterways, are all so important. If anyone has any questions or follow-up questions, feel free to contact me. I never did tell you who I was in the beginning, although I'm sure most of you watching this video will recognize me and remember me, unless you're a new employee. But you may contact me. I'm Michael Wilson. My phone number here at Cornell Cooperative Extension is 845-429-7085, extension 110, or you can email me at mw767@cornell.edu. I'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions about this program, clarify anything that you need to know about your daily operations. Or I actually run the horticultural lab. I'm not an environmental employee for Cornell. I'm one of their horticulturalists. But I do run the lab, so if any of you guys get a tick or a tick bite, or you need an insect ID'd, or you have a plant problem, or you have a plant question, feel free to contact me also at the horticultural lab. Contact phone number is the same. Again, it's 845-429-7085, extension 110, or mw767@cornell.edu. I'd be more than happy to help and assist you. Okay, thank you very much. Goodbye.